Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining the Women's Foundation of Montana and PowerHouse Montana for our PowerHouse webinar on tough conversations. This is Jen Ewell. I'm the director of the Women's Foundation of Montana, and I'm really excited to be here today with some wonderful co-presenters, Chris Marie Campbell and Susan Clark, who are joining us from Thrive, Inc. in the Flathead. For those of you who may not know, the Women's Foundation of Montana is a nonprofit organization. It's a statewide organization that serves women and girls, and our mission is to advance economic independence for Montana women and create a brighter future for girls. We are a component fund of the Montana Community Foundation, and we have an office in Missoula for the Women's Foundation portion, and then the Montana Community Foundation has an office in Helena. You can see here is a photo of some of us who are involved. I am the second one from the left. That's me, Jen Ewell. And then to the far right is Mary Rutherford, who is the CEO of the Montana Community Foundation. And some of you may know that we're pictured here with Lily Ledbetter, which is pretty awesome. And then also
Jen,
I wanted to share.
Yeah. Jen, you're also on the cover of 406 magazine this month. So.
I am on the cover of 406 Women magazine. For those of you in the Flathead, you may be able to pick one of those up, and then you can see a really big picture of my face, perhaps larger than I would like. And also there's an article in there that features Chris Marie and Susan as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Make your trip around the sun fun.
Wonderful. Good. So for those of you who may not know, the Women's Foundation has a project that's called PowerHouse Montana. It's an online platform on which women can connect to mentors and resources to help them advance their careers and potentially start businesses and become leaders in their own communities. And you can find that at www.powerhousemt.org. And this webinar is a part of our PowerHouse programming. I also wanted to just give a big shout out to Sarah Korn, who is our AmeriCorps Vista and is the coordinator of the PowerHouse work at the moment and also put together this webinar. So thanks so much, Sarah. Okay, so that is the background. I wanted to really welcome Chris Marie and Susan. Thank you so much for giving of yourselves and your time and your expertise to share with women across the state of Montana. We're really excited about your topic today about tough conversations. And I'm going to go ahead and just kick it off to you to take over.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen.
Hey, we know that really people are not really excited about tough conversations. However, you do have to have them. So
we're excited about learning about it.
Yeah. There you go. And this is a treat for us. We just love presenting and speaking. So get us in front of an audience and we're good.
Well, we hope.
Yeah, that's true. At least we're enjoying ourselves. We hope you do as too. And that's Susan on the left, and I'm Chris Marie on the right. And we have we're located in Whitefish, Montana, and we'll tell you more about us. But we've been working together for about 15 years, helping.
Longer than that now, I hate to say it. But,
yeah.
But anyway, we just keep it the same at this point.
Right.
No,
and we work with organizations, leaders, and teams to help them deal with tough conversations so they can get to, we help them also develop trust and get to their strategy and help them develop as leaders. We also work with individuals through coaching and lots of other stuff. But that's a little bit about us. And we did have a little conversion. We work in Keynote, and this is PowerPoint, so we're going to have a little funkiness with our slides there with the headers, but hopefully.
We'll call this tough presentations, but we'll get through our slides. It'll work. It's all on there, and we'll cover it.
So tough situations that we think we've experienced people have a hard time with are giving feedback, whether that's to a peer or a boss, disagreeing with your boss, oh my, dealing with a difficult client. Let's say a client thinks you charge too much. That's often uncomfortable. Asking for a raise or saying no, setting boundaries. This is where and especially women, tend to really struggle with these specific areas.
And part of the reason why they are difficult conversations is because generally speaking, they involve they involve high stakes for at least one, if not more, in the dialogue. There are strong emotions that usually go with that, passion, somebody really wants something, and there are differing opinions that usually result. And that is a little bit of what I refer to as the trifecta for conflict. And that when those three things merge together, and so people generally have a hard time dealing with conflict.
Yeah. And, there's real concerns. They aren't easy, yet it's not comfortable. We weren't trained in it, but it's a natural part of business relationships. It's actually a natural part of any relationships, and a key to actually increasing your influence and also you feeling in charge and empowered in the work that you do. So today what we're going to give you are 3 behaviors that tend to undermine your success in those situations. It's actually 3 simple tools. We're going to actually give you real-time tools that you can use in the moment to help you stay calm.
We added a bonus.
Yeah, you get a bonus tool. And 3 practical tools to have these conversations successfully. So that's on the agenda. And first, what we thought we'd do, this is me, Chris Marie, and we'd each introduce ourselves in the context of having tough conversations, because I grew up with an Army Colonel dad, and so every night at the dinner table was like running the gauntlet, hoping I didn't say anything that would make him angry, because he was a pretty angry man, because if you disagreed with him or upset him, bad things happened. So I learned my superpower of how to ask a question, change the subject, reflect back what he was saying, all these tools to help diffuse a conflict, and never really show up myself. I was good at managing the conversation as opposed to showing up in it. Now, this became my superpower as I went on. I was an engineer at Boeing. I was a rower. And then I started working, got my MBA and started working at Arthur Andersen, which was a high-powered consulting firm. And in that consulting firm, I was at a software client. I had a team of 6 consultants, and we were starting a project. My senior manager came in and said, okay, this is the strategy. This is how we're going to solve the client's problem. And all I could think in my head is, that's not going to solve the client's problem. But rather than say that, I asked a question. Do you think that's going to solve the client's problem? And he said, yes, get to work. And I was catapulted back to my dad's dinner table. I shut up and got to work. We got to the end of 6 months of work. We had not solved the client's problem. And the partners at Arthur Andersen wanted to gain more work at this client, so they invited the VP in at this big software company and said, how are they had different projects going on. How are all the projects going? And he turned to me, pointed his finger at me, and he said, well, that project Chris Marie led? That was a disaster, a complete disaster. So I got blamed, and no wonder, because I didn't speak up, and I vowed right then and there, I'm going to figure out how to find my voice and help other people do the same, because this is really painful. So I'll let Susan introduce herself.
Okay, for me, I'd say I'm going to just share an experience I had when I was in my 20s, and I was actually working as an anesthesiologist tech in a hospital. And basically what I think of as an anesthesiologist tech is you're the social arm for the anesthesiologist, because often they don't have a lot of time to talk. So I was the person who would come up to someone who was getting ready to go into surgery and sort of help them feel more at ease, more comfortable, give them a little bit of the lay of the land. And often when I was having that conversation, their surgeon would come over to kind of do a last-minute check-in with them. And there was this one experience I had where I was there with a woman who was getting ready to have her knee operated on. And as we were talking, she was telling me about how she had injured her right knee and talking a bit about what had happened. And in the middle of it, her surgeon came over, and I stepped aside to give him space, and he went about doing some testing on her left knee, and they had some sort of conversation, and he walked away, and I walked back, and I said, I'm kind of curious. I thought you told me it was your right knee. And she said, oh, it is. And I said, well, did you mention that to him? Because he was looking at the left knee. And she said, oh, he knows. And I had this moment where I was like, oh, I don't know. So I actually decided to go and just make sure that the surgeon knew. So I walked over to the surgeon, and I said, excuse me, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that it was her right knee, not her left knee. Well, he turned around and, just lit into me. It's like, who are you to say anything to me about my job? Like, I am in operating mode. Just do not talk to me. It just totally blew me off. And I have to admit, I went silent. I was just like, okay, well, it's all I could do. So I backed away. And I wondered. And actually what was fascinating is at the very end of the day, the same surgeon walked up to me. He actually said, I actually owe you an apology. I jumped on you. I bit your head off. And frankly, I would have operated on the wrong knee, and had you not said anything. And I didn't. And I said, I was stunned. I was like, does that ever happen? He said, sadly, it happens more often than it should. And, and sometimes it's because of people like me who just, bite your head back. But for me, what I walked away thinking, one, that he came and talked to me was one thing. Two, I also walked away realizing that even if I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to go silent. Sometimes it is a pretty important decision to risk even getting my head bit off.
So, and we've actually we were fortunate to do a Whitefish TEDx talk, Conflict, Use It, Don't Diffuse It, and you can hear more about the same topic in that TED talk. Okay. So what we've found is most people don't like tough conversations, weren't trained in it, work to avoid it, and that seems pretty rational. And these people are bright, competent, and accomplished, but often feel stumped when it comes to dealing with tough conversations effectively. I mean, really high-powered people high up in their careers still struggle with this topic. So no matter where you are, you're not alone if you have a tough time with tough conversations. And go ahead.
We want to look at some statistics about what the impact is when you don't have those tough conversations. And so the first one we want to talk about is some statistics from work. And these come from the Gallup poll around engagement. Engagement is really what we mean by engagement is when people are psychologically committed and engaged and have make positive contributions to their work. And you can see here, it's pretty depressing to read this figure because, 31.5% of the people are engaged. Over half of the organization is disengaged. And we actually believe that a lot of that disengagement is often due to these types of conversations that go underground and they're not had. And people become dissatisfied, apathetic, don't engage when they need to.
And even that 17.5 actively disengaged, that's kind of a scary figure. They're working against the organization. Yes. So you really want to, if you're leading an organization, you really want to try to create a culture where people can speak up. Because this is even a more brutal story, and I don't know if you guys remember when the Columbia shuttle came in the atmosphere in 2003, but it wound up incinerating and 7 astronauts died. And of course they did a whole investigation and they found it was a culture that prevented effective communication of critical safety information and stifled professional differences of opinion. So really, it's amazing that, like Susan's story with the knee operation, here's NASA where people died. Now, most of our businesses, that's not going to happen, but there's so much information that doesn't get communicated that's important.
Right. Usually in business, it's a matter of poor, strategies don't get promoted, and things don't happen in the best way. The best results don't happen. But in other situations, it really can be quite costly.
Yeah.
So we think it's important to know that these are some of the barriers and some of the costs when you don't speak up.
Yeah. So we're going to now talk about 3 behaviors that undermine your success in these tough conversations. These first 3 you're going to notice pretty quickly. They are fighting, when you're yelling, blaming, using global language, eye-rolling, interrupting, debating. Flighting, you're just leaving. This is mine. Distracting, changing the topic, minimizing the importance, explaining, or just omitting what you think, feel, and want. And the last one is freeze. And this is a lot of times people don't recognize they do this. There's little to no emotional effect. They're not aware of feeling anything. Controlled, sound robotic. You get stiff. And these are the instinctive reactions in those situations.
These are all very natural things. Our reptilian brain, this is how we learn to survive, because there was a time and a place when there really were saber-toothed tigers coming after us, and there was a good reason why we learned to fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. However, and frankly, there's not a lot of times anymore where there are saber-toothed tigers or things that alarming coming after us. And we still, not only do we still have these natural responses, but even more so as we've developed and grown up, we've become much more rational and sophisticated in how we use them.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we go into those sophisticated responses, we're going to keep coming back to these 3 areas, the me, we, and the problem we're solving, because in a healthy conversation, these are 3 key focus areas that are critical for success. And typically, we omit one or more of these areas. So let's talk about how those sophisticated responses show up in tough conversations.
So when we talk about these opt-out styles, like we said, they're basically three different ways in which, Chris Marie gave a great example early on of how she was an accommodator in the sense that she learned to manage the situation and take.
Before you go there, let's actually say what they are. So the three opt-out styles, and this is what we refer to them as, is opt-out because you're opting out of the conflict, are superstar, accommodator, and separator. And the superstar really values action and results and eliminates the we, really the other people or other person, and has a really good, healthy sense of their me, meaning what they think is right.
So just to give you a little bit of an example of that, recently, Chris Marie and I have been working on our book, and this is actually an example where Chris Marie pulled out her superstar style because we had gotten some feedback from someone that our introduction wasn't quite up to snuff, and they wanted us. We were talking to some publishers, and they wanted us to change the introduction, and so she just figured. I hadn't really responded to any of that yet. I still wasn't even sure whether I don't know whether I was totally on board or not, but I went off
skiing.
Wasn't. It was a powder day here at the mountain, so I went skiing. And when I came back, she had spent hours reworking the entire introduction. And now you might think I should be grateful, but the reality of it was I was not. She had just assumed, we hadn't had a conversation about it. I wasn't bought in. But in her mind, she was like, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and do this because then it's done. And like she even said to me, I was going to do all the heavy lifting so you would thank me. And the problem was I didn't have the same goodwill that she thought I should. I was like, but I actually wanted to be a part of the discussion and the changes we were going to make. So,
and leaders can get into this superstar style. Well, I'll just make the decision. I'll go ahead and do it, and they'll thank me. It'll just be easier. It's too much hassle to deal with everybody's opinion. So this is a real common one when you just decide I'm going to do it because you eliminate the impact of Susan was she wasn't even bought in on the feedback. She wasn't sure she wanted the intro changed that way. So you miss that when you do your superstar style. Now the accommodator, and this was me growing up, really values harmony and relationships. And so they want to keep everything smooth. And so often what happens, and this is what I was doing growing up, they omit the me, meaning how I'm feeling. And what happens is usually it looks like, well, I'll go and talk to, like when I was growing up, I'll go and talk to Dad and smooth that out, and I'll go talk to my sister, and then maybe they'll get along. But I'm trying to broker the peace one-on-one, and it takes a lot of work. And I'm not actually saying, hey, you know what? I'm uncomfortable with what's happening.
And often this is one that shows up at work because, frankly, what happens, and some of you may have experienced this before, is that, that we come in often as coaches. And we come in as coaches after someone has gotten their 360 feedback and has been surprised to learn that people on their leadership team, their own peers, have not told them some of the most crucial information. And I know a lot of times this happens because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings or something like that. But what happens in the long run is that then it comes back through some sort of 360 or coaching performance issue, and then the person finds out that people have not been saying something. So this is a pretty significant one that, to look at. And it comes naturally. Often people don't want to hurt someone's feelings, but you may want to think about that one. Mm-hmm. And the last one on here is what we refer to as a separator. They value clarity and calm, and they can eliminate both the me and the we. And the way you can tell that one, probably many of you have been in a business situation where there's somebody, big debate or even, major conflict is going on, and that person is usually on their computer working on some other problem altogether because they actually decide, I can't deal. Those two are always fighting about something. When they've resolved it, then I'll get back engaged. The problem is they've actually disengaged from the actual problem they need to be focused on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So just be thinking about which one you relate to. And you can see even I can be an accommodator and I can be a superstar. So there might be more than one that you relate to. But as you're thinking about your own tough conversations that you've either tried to have or avoided having, or think about how you've shown up in there. And if there's any questions, we'll come back and be answering those questions. But what we want to turn to next is there is actually a way to transform these reactions so that you can have healthy conversations. And that is really focusing on the three key areas, the me, the we, and the problem we're solving. So the rest of the talk, we're going to actually give you the ability to include these different areas, especially, let's say, if you're an accommodator, you're less likely to deal with you. You're me. And so we're going to jump into that one first. I keep getting the wrong thing here.
Well, and even if you're a fighter, it's important for me to deal with me, to settle myself down. And we're going to talk specifically about that now.
So the me is really become aware of your opt-out style, whether you're a superstar, accommodator, or separator, and take responsibility for your reaction. And so the goal is really become aware of how you're reacting and take the steps to settle yourself. Now, this is one of those things where people say, just be calm, in the midst of something, and you're like, okay, if I could talk to somebody or I could go take a run, that's how I could be calm. This is not so easy to just be calm in the midst of a tough conversation or when there's conflict.
Yes, it's not easy to walk out of the boardroom to go listen to music or to actually do anything. It's very difficult. Sounds good on paper.
So the key here is to recognize and embrace your own vulnerabilities. And vulnerability, when we say that, it's the willingness to expose oneself to danger. But one of the main things, if you're having a reaction and you know it, you start to become aware, is just to say, let's say you're getting defensive, to say, you know what, right now I notice I'm getting defensive. Or right now, this is pretty uncomfortable for me. To reveal that is a huge way of you settling yourself because you're not fighting that inside of yourself. And so here's what happens in the midst of conflict. There's conflict, there's the intensity, and your tension and ambiguity goes up, and you hit what we call an oh shit moment, which is that moment where the situation just overwhelms your capacity to respond. And you get into that fight, flight, and freeze, that survival mode, you're reactive. And by the way, you've just lowered your IQ. You have less resources to actually have a conversation, and you can get stuck there. And what's unfortunate is a lot of times these are the moments that important decisions are being made, when you are most reactive and at your least resource space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we actually want to give you tools to help you regulate in the midst of that situation. And this is where the three real-time tools. So in the middle of that, so you don't have to take a break or go away or talk to your coach or your therapist or counselor. You can actually settle yourself while the conversation is happening. And so the idea is to settle your nervous system, land in, and utilize the body. Because what happens is a lot of times we get caught up in our head and we're obsessing, oh my gosh, and maybe our heart rate's going up and we start sweating if you're aware of that. And the idea is to actually come down from that hyper state and use this big body that we have to settle yourself. And one way you can do that, and you can do that right now, you can try this on, is just feel your feet. So you can do that by wiggling your toes or swiping your feet on the carpet or in your shoes, whatever you're on. And imagine even you've got roots coming out of the soles of your feet, and you can feel them getting heavier. Another variation is feel your feet and your seat, your bum in the chair, and just see if you can relax into the support of the chair. And I'm doing this right now, and what I notice is my body naturally takes a breath. It just is a settling because it's getting me out because I'm in presenter mode, so I'm kind of talking fast and revved up, and this actually just slows my system down a bit. And it's a simple thing, but it sends a signal to your nervous system that there's that you actually do have more resources than you're aware of, and it connects you into them. The second tool is what we call orienting. So this is actually, and you can try this right now, just turning your head. What happens let me just back up. What happens in the midst of conflict is your vision actually narrows. You focus in on this threat that's in front of you, even if it's your boss or your coworker. All of a sudden, everything else goes, and you're just like, that is my target. And that's a neurological, nervous system response. So what you want to do is actually widen your focus by slowly turning your head in one direction. You can do this now. And then just notice something in your environment, pause, and just take it in. The shape of it, the color. And then turn your head slowly in another direction. And land on something. Notice the shape of it, the color, the texture, and take it in. And then just keep doing that really gently and really slowly. And again, I take a breath when I do that. And what you're doing is there's a nerve that comes into the back of your skull. It's called your vagus nerve. And what you're doing is you're activating that. And that's the second largest nerve in your body besides your spinal cord. And it connects to your rest and digest. So it actually helps settle and activate your parasympathetic nervous system. And nobody has to know you're doing it. You're just kind of looking around the space really gently. The third tool is actually while you're sitting there, and you could put your hand on your belly and just take a couple of low, deep belly breaths. Just inviting the breath down into your belly. Because when we're in that fight or flight, we're usually breathing in our chest, and it's shallow and it's quick. So this is, again, activating a different system, your rest and digest, by allowing those deeper breaths. So all three of those are just simple, real-time tools that help you actually counter the nervous system response, and they help you regulate your nervous system, and you get access to more of your resources. So you become more aware, your creativity increases because more of your brain is activated, your confidence, and you have more choices. So that's some of the tools that you can use to help you settle yourself in the moment when you're stressed.
Now, the next part of this that is crucial is what we refer to as the we. And the biggest challenge here, and this is inherent to who we are as human beings, is we tend to get into the struggle is that we tend to get into the challenge of right and wrong. We naturally go to thinking one thing. Maybe we don't even think we have the right answer, but we think there is a right answer. And we get very committed and stuck on trying to find that right answer. And we actually often get into a power struggle with whoever we're in conversation. I'm right, you're wrong. Some version of that goes on. We actually believe that what's critical here in the we is to build and develop a sense of curiosity, a willingness to consider, maybe it's not like that. Maybe not be so invested in our own agenda, our own storyline. We want to talk a little bit about how that storyline shows how we develop our story, because most of the time our interpretation or the meaning we've given to something is simply that. It's a story. It's not a fact. Now, we have come to that because we are people who can gather data through our senses, our perceptions. We see it, we hear it, taste, touch, and smell. But that information is coming in all the time, and that goes immediately through what we refer to as our personal filter. And that is all of our history. It's our culture. It's a variety of different things. It's our significant emotional events. And that history deletes, distorts, and generalizes information until it pops out to our interpretation or story. And the problem is we get stuck there. And I want to give you kind of a working example of this. A while back, I was working with a woman who was, she had been approached by the leadership within her organization, and they wanted to give her a really plum job, but it was going to involve her having to relocate. And she was a coaching client of mine, and she was, came in talking to me about it like, well, I'm pretty sure it's not a good idea. It's not going to work for me. And when we were in the session, I started to ask her a few more questions. And basically what what came up was she had come to a storyline. Like, there were three reasons that she didn't think the job was right for her. One, it would mean she was going to have to move and relocate, and it was too expensive, wasn't good for her family. And so that was one piece. Secondly, she was concerned that she wouldn't she wouldn't succeed at the job, and then she'd lose this position that she had that she was pretty satisfied with. And finally, she was worried because her husband really enjoyed his job, and she wasn't sure at all that he was ready to relocate. But when we talked about it more, it was really clear that was all part of her story. And so the suggestion that I had was, instead of just saying no to this, why don't you go back and check it out, find out what is possible, isn't. And what was fascinating about this particular scenario, she did go back, and they actually offered her all three of those things. Worked them, they said they were going to pay for her to relocate, whatever it took to do that. They would, if she had a year to figure out whether the job worked for her or not, and they would actually give her back an equivalent position, if she didn't want to move back. where she was now located. And finally, they when she talked to her husband, they were willing to give him, put him with a recruiter. He was excited about that. He found another job. But in that scenario, her own story would have stopped her from doing it pretty quickly.
And actually, I think when you were talking to me about her, part of her filter was early on in she had actually taken a new position, and she had failed at it, which is part of why she was so hesitant. So that filter was deleting any sort of possibility of success this time. So it's amazing how when we go through things, we think, oh, this is good and this is bad, and it's based on past experiences. And that's that power of the filter. Like, no, I could never ask for a raise because they've never given a raise. Or, we just get concrete in our stories, and it's not really true.
Mm-hmm.
So the key is to don't assume you're right and be willing to check it out. And breaking it down is a key way to help you check out your stories. Like, this is the data I'm hearing, this is the story I'm telling myself, but I want to see, do you agree or disagree?
And like even in that example of if your boss says, you ask for the raise and your boss says no, it's really quick to go to, okay, well, it's because I'm not that valuable, or it's because I'm not this. The other way to handle that would be in that moment, like, I hear that you can't give me the raise right now. My assumption is it's because you don't really think I'm ready for it, or I'm not doing a good enough job, and I just want to check that out. And a lot of times that's not at all what's going on for the boss. Mm-hmm. There may be some other reason why it's not a good time to give you a raise, and then you could actually have that conversation and not just walk away thinking you're not valued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we tend to think our stories are right. We've never really aired them and said, do you agree or disagree? And a key tool in this is your ability to listen with curiosity. And a lot of times as we're listening, we're already formulating our response, or we think, oh my gosh, I've got to change, or I've got to agree with them. And none of that is really true. And this is a huge, very powerful tool. If you simply start to reflect back what you're hearing, the gist and the emotional tone of what somebody is saying, one, they have the experience of feeling heard because you're not just countering with your own opinion, but you're taking the time to reflect back. And you can also clarify, this part fits. They can clarify, this part fits, yeah, but no, that's not what I said or not what I meant. So this is a really powerful tool in any tough conversation. We also work with couples, and you should try this at home. It really works wonders.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
Well, the last part of this, and we intentionally come to the problem you're trying to solve last, because there is always, in business in particular, we are always so focused on let's just get to the business problem, and we leave the people equation out of it. We either leave ourselves out of it, or we leave other people out of it, and we just try to solve a problem. If you bring yourself into the situation and you're curious and interested in the other people involved in it, it actually becomes very easy then to solve the problem, and it goes much quicker. So that's why this is the last one we talk about.
Yes, and so it's really about rebuilding a bridge if there was a breakdown in a bridge, or building a bridge and there's three key questions that you want to consider in doing this. The first question is the me question. Why is this so difficult for me? Like, why is it a high-stakes situation? Or how am I putting together this story that leads me to the conclusion that my boss doesn't think I'm valuable, or whatever, if it's about that?
Well, I was thinking one of the questions we talked about was that whole scenario where it's like my client doesn't want to pay me this fee. They don't,
they think I charge too much.
They think I charge too much.
Yeah.
Now, there is a storyline that anyone who probably has their own business has bumped up against at some point in time. And if you haven't, you're probably not charging enough. But, that's all aside. The reality of it is, though, if I check, really what's going on for me in that moment is that I've actually, think that my value has something to do with whether they buy from me or not. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's just not what's going on for the other person. The reason somebody buys something, a lot of times the reason even somebody says it's too expensive, 9 times out of 10, if I don't take that on and get into my own stuff about that, I could find out. So tell me more. So, that's just one thing. Why is this difficult for me?
Oops, I jumped ahead. And so why is this so important to you? That's one of the questions you can start to use to understand, even if this client thinks you charge too much. That's what they've said. To actually say, okay, well, even saying, well, why is this project so important to you? What do you make this mean? All of these are phrases to get under how are they putting the world together? Because they may actually be using price as a block, and there's something else going on.
Often that, very rarely is it usually the price that's the problem. But you have to get underneath that because that's a good way to stop the conversation.
And then you want to build mutual purpose, which is, are you clear on the problem you're trying to solve? Because a lot of times people will fight over strategies. Well, I was trying to think of a good example of this. But they fight over strategies versus coming up to a level where, we're actually aligned. We are actually trying to solve the same problem.
I was thinking when we've done a lot of work in healthcare, and particularly helping IT departments who are bringing in electronic records for physicians. And 9 times out of 10, somewhere in any sort of big, what's that called, implementation or process in there's a point where there's a significant breakdown in mutual purpose between the IT approach, the technical people who are trying to solve that problem, and the clinical people. And what they're doing is they're arguing over this strategy because they have very different strategy. And when we can get them to back up a little bit and think higher picture, why are you guys, any of you, even interested in this project? They can usually get back to that it is about the client. Even they've just assumed, like the doctors assumed that the IT people were only interested in streamlining how to get results into the computer. The computer people, the technical people are like, these doctors, they just don't want to have to do the work to have to implement this. And so, but they've lost sight of the actual mutual purpose, that it could be beneficial for the client and why. And they both have the patient. And they both have really good reasons when they listen to each other, and they're very similar.
Yeah. But a lot of times it's backing up and getting clear, what problem are we trying to solve, which is actually getting the patient's information available across the hospital, is a really good reason, and they both could align around that. Yeah. And if you have questions on any of these, we're coming to a place where we'll be able to answer questions. Just want to finish up this piece. The key takeaways for having tough conversations, so kind of some summaries. One is be aware of how you opt out, whether you think of it in terms of fight, flight, or freeze, or whether you think of it in terms of superstar, accommodator, and separator. Notice what you do and where you do it. So as soon as you start to turn up the volume and notice that, you can actually start to do something different. And you can be vulnerable and curious. Vulnerable is also noticing your nervous system and being willing to feel your feet, orient to the space, take some breaths so you can actually increase your resources in the moment. And the curious is being willing to break down how you're putting the world together, your data, your story, and check it out. And then using that tool to reflect back. If you just took that away, you would revolutionize how you actually experience conversations if you started reflecting back. And we didn't actually talk about this.
Well, I have a favorite quote of mine, which is, it's not what you do, it's what you do next. And 9 times out, this has been one of the most useful things in my life because I've been known to say things that not so gracefully. But I've learned it's not so important for me to beat myself up for that. It's to actually show up and worry and pay attention and notice that I've maybe said something. And it's what I do next that matters most. So.
I think sometimes we when we get nervous, like we said something and it looks like that person is maybe they're getting reactive or upset, we start to actually try to talk more or rephrase what we've said versus stopping and pausing and saying, okay, something isn't landing well over there. Tell me what's going on, to actually be curious and interested in that other person. And we wanted to give you, we have a free workbook. If you go to our site, in the first 30 seconds, it's one of those pop-up things. But you could download How to Have Tough Conversations at Work, your 4 steps to increase your influence, and it's actually a worksheet. So if you're prepping for a tough conversation with your boss, with your client, with a coworker, it gives you step-by-step, kind of fill in the blank, follow along steps and phrases that you can say to help you be successful in having your tough conversation.
And just to be clear, we don't actually know that success means you're going to get that raise or any of that, because I think often that's where we get ourselves stuck, because we actually think that would be the meaning of success. And sometimes that actually just stops you from having the conversation. And what you really need to know, what we think successful is having it in a way in which you show up fully and say what you need to say. You are able to listen to and be curious and hear the other person, and you're actually solving a problem that fits for you together. To us, when those three components are paid attention to, we think that's been a successful conversation, no matter what the outcome is.
And I think along those lines, I think people think, well, I tried it and it didn't go well, so I'm never trying it again. And remember, you are learning a skill, and it's going to be something you're going to have to deal with your entire life, because people are different and they're going to do things you don't like, and so this is going to be an issue. So remember to have some compassion for yourself and to know that you're on a learning curve, and to be willing to make mistakes, and you can recover. I think we get really brittle in our belief that we can't recover, and you can. So we want to open it up, Jen, to some Q&A before
Wonderful.
we do our little closing slide. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you for all of that. I love all of that. The pointers about how to stay in your own body and stay curious and hear the other person. And I am going to go ahead and unmute all the folks on the phone so that they can directly ask you questions. I do want to just say, for those out there who might have background noise, if you would, mute your own phone at this point so that we don't have to hear that background noise. That would be wonderful.
The conference has been unmuted.
Okay, so we are live, and anybody can ask a question of Chris, Marie, and Susan.
You could even ask, this is the tough conversation I'm worried about having, and we'll help you through that. So it could even be a little coaching thing, if you're willing. Can you place the URL for your website in the chat, please? Can we do that? I think we can do that.
Yeah.
We'll
find out.
Can you guys do it, or else I can do it for you?
I think
go ahead
we
and
got
try
it.
and type.
I think I got it. See if
wonderful.
Yeah.
It came just to the chairperson.
Oh, I should share it to everyone. I don't have my glasses on. That's the problem.
Okay.
Broadcast to all.
Yeah.
Okay. Doing it.
Okay.
I see that you have a question. Yep.
Yeah, I have to fire a sales rep group today. Wow. Okay, that is,
is this many people, Anne, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just let us know. Is it more than one?
The director, it's the director I'll have to work with specifically. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, that is a tough conversation, and I definitely, I assume that is, and in that scenario, like I make an assumption it's because of performance issues, but again, I don't know.
Yeah, it's all numbers based, so it's not.
Okay.
It's more black and white, but could we have been better? Yes. Could we, whatever, but I just really, at this point, it's kind of gone on a little too long, so it's just tough, because I give them more time, maybe, but I'm also giving them a lot financially for not doing what they should be doing. So it's a really hard position, and I think they really love the product that they sell for us, but they don't do enough of it, and coaching has not been well received.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's actually some good data that you have there to say, not just the numbers, but to also say, the coaching that has not, and I have interpreted, has not been well received. And you can give them some examples. And the key for you, like I'm thinking as the person who has to do this job, often that can be where you have to find a way to be able to stay really clear in the midst of that without, and be willing to kind of hear their whatever it is, because my guess is they might be angry, they might be upset, they might be hurt, but that's for you to find your strength in the midst of that, to not just go to, okay, well, I feel bad about this too, and because that probably won't help them, knowing that you feel badly. They probably will want to know, okay, that you're clear. And that may be a hard thing to stay centered in under those circumstances. So
not necessarily. So be aware, Anne, of not feeling like you have to apologize.
Yeah.
Because you've got some concrete data and some good reasons why this person doesn't fit in your organization. You can have compassion for that, if they do get upset. But, I've noticed there's been a pattern of the numbers falling below what we've talked about. When I have give you coaching, it doesn't seem like my experience is you haven't actually taken it in or received it well or changed. Tell me where I'm wrong. You could say that. And they might get defensive, and you could just use a reflecting back tool. So you think you have taken my coaching. Well, okay. I disagree, but I hear that's how you see it. And I still have gotten to the place where this is the best decision for the business. We're going to let you go.
The breathing and the tools we talked about would be very useful for you in that moment, so that you can just be clear in that.
Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, Anne, or do you have another question?
And I think I've said in the past, I understand how you feel, and so I think you said don't say that, because I probably don't completely understand how they feel. So
I would more reflect back what they're feeling, not that you understand it. So it sounds like you're really disappointed and angry.
Yeah, that's more helpful
I like
at that time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Well, good luck with that. I hope it goes well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We've got another one from Anita. In a classroom setting, if you notice a negative behavior from a student towards a teaching assistant, is it better to wait and see if there's a pattern or address it immediately? Well, Anita, if it registered on my screen, I would address it. And you could address it from the me perspective, like, I noticed, Tim, you just yelled at Mary. I'm uncomfortable with that. It doesn't feel good, or talk about the impact it has on you, and my preference is you don't do that. That's one way of handling it. I don't know if you have a different point of view, Susan.
Well, I'd say that would be definitely the first thing, and it may, one of the things and I don't know if I have this right from the situation I'm reading. It's like you're observing something, and the teaching assistant would probably be the person it would be best if they spoke up and said, when that happens, I'm uncomfortable. I don't like it. So, if it's not something that's really inappropriate, I might step back and check in with the teaching assistant. To me, I didn't like it, but you didn't say anything. I was somewhat surprised that you didn't bring it up. Or, so that might be another technique for you. Does that help? Or
yeah. Amita?
Yes.
Might be, okay.
And are you the teacher and she's the teaching assistant sort of thing?
I am not. I'm the executive director of the school. So this is something that a teaching assistant has called me about, that she's just been noticing this pattern. It's just been happening this week. And, I'm definitely a type of person to be like, okay, let's just nip it in the bud. But if the teaching assistant wants to wait, I'm just trying to figure out, when is it? I don't want it to keep happening because it impacts the entire classroom.
Well, I would kind of agree with you, Mita. I would probably encourage the teaching assistant for her to deal with it, or him, whoever it is, to deal with it more quickly.
And that might be one to kind of explore a little further. What's really going on? Why aren't they? The caveat, that sounds like one where someone's making a decision. They don't want to be disruptive to the student or something. Yeah, I'd be curious about what was going on for them that they weren't as interested in nipping it in the bud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But
that's helpful. Yeah.
Also be clear with them. This is something I think needs to be addressed sooner, because it's going to be problematic both for the student and for the classroom.
Right.
So.
And I guess the piece I was saying is don't necessarily make it right or wrong what the student's saying, like even the teaching assistant, to notice what's the data and what's the impact to her or him and the other students. Yeah. To not make it like you cannot do this. More
sure,
share
sure,
the
yeah,
impact.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Right.
Good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love your guys' questions. Are there other scenarios? We love this. You could even get into counterpoint. That Susan and I had different ideas of what you should do.
I think this is Jen. I just wanted to offer that at the Women's Foundation, we often get questions from women who are interested in negotiating for better wages or for talking to their boss about workplace conditions or flexibility at work or benefits that they feel like they need. And so I love your take on how to prepare, conduct those kind of discussions.
It's so funny because we're just actually, just like we put together how to have tough conversations at work, we're just putting together how to ask for a raise. And it's like things to actually say. And some of the things that, we've put in there is, one, you want to, when you're negotiating a job, remember, it's a lot of times women will be like, oh my God, thank God they want to hire me. Okay, I'll take whatever. And they give in really quickly. And there's ways that things you can say that will, that's the time they want you most. You have your best negotiating power. And so to ask for what you want, this is, do you want to give you well, I guess Susan kind of gave an example of this woman. She was transferring, but she asked for what she wanted and she got it. A lot of times you want to put yourself in the best position to ask for that. So making sure you're taking on responsibilities and focusing on what you have done in the past, if you've expanded, and the impact your behavior has had on the business is the what you want to talk about. Not like I deserve it or it's been 3 years since I've gotten a raise. You don't want to say those sorts of things. You want to say, you know what, it's been a year since I've had a raise, and in that year I've taken on 2 projects. They actually really helped the website, and they really did this, and da-da. And so I'd like to discuss. Oops, somebody's got some background noise there.
Getting some feedback, folks.
I'd like to discuss bringing up my salary. Is there any way you can mute that line there?
Yeah, I think I.
What do you think?
Nope.
Did you respond?
Okay.
I think I can.
So you want to open the discussion. And the other thing is, don't be crushed if they say no.
That's probably one of the biggest things. Is really this is how bringing it back to all 3 of these are important. Really take care of yourself in that, because so often when you're going in to ask for a raise, or maybe you're actually going in because you want to work from home for a reason because of childcare, totally different than anything your company's ever done, and you are assuming that you're going to get told no, or you're assuming whatever your own story is and whatever you believe, you're equating that to. If I don't get the raise, they don't value me, or if this happens. It's really check those underlying personal beliefs that you might be carrying in that you don't actually know are true and may not fit, and that just going and asking. I've seen people leave jobs so many times because they didn't like a situation they were in, but they never spoke up about it. And it's like, wow, if you're gonna leave anyway, why don't you have that conversation first? And this, because you'd be surprised how many times somebody, especially somebody in a leadership role, doesn't actually know the impact something they're doing is having until somebody comes forward and says, this is why I'm interested in this.
And if it is like a workplace conditions thing, using that model, like I notice, I'm trying to make up a workplace condition, like I notice we keep the temperature at 65, and that 30% of our employees have more colds than the average population. So my story is we're keeping it too cold, and it would be better if we raised the temperature. But I want to know, do you agree or disagree? Have you noticed, like, to actually open it up for a dialogue, not coming in like guns a-blazing, all hot, trying to make as soon as you make it they're wrong, you're right, you shut down a dialogue and you put the person on the defensive.
Or even the opposite. I'm going to be wrong. I know I'm going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And
I'm not going to even bring it up.
Right.
Great.
But stay tuned for our handout. It's going to be a free handout we'll have on the website, how to ask for a raise, in that specific one.
Does that kind of cover the different pieces? There were a couple different scenarios you brought up. But
I think that's really helpful. I think it's good information that we can apply to lots of different situations. So I think that's great. Yeah. And I wanted to give you, we only have about 4 more minutes, so I wanted to give you that time if you wanted to wrap it up.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, we wanted to share just some things, a little bit about what we offer, because we do online programs, and we just started one yesterday, Build Your Mojo. It's a 4-week online class that you do live with us. But it's really about getting unstuck and making space for yourself to do what matters most. We have somebody who's starting an art business, somebody else who's kicking off her coaching practice, another kind of two moms that are trying to actually make room for themselves in their lives. I was trying to think of somebody else in the group. But like really to stop procrastinating, because Susan, actually you created this course because you're such a great procrastinator.
Yes, I have all sorts of ways in which I've learned how to procrastinate, and I've had various things that I've learned that have helped me move beyond that and get to some of the things I really want to accomplish. So it's been fun to put that together and see it happening and see, people.
And we offer that like 3 times a year. And then Be Brave, which is a longer course. It's about 6 weeks, and we have it's really about making sure you make you matter and finding your voice and speaking up in all sorts of situations at work and at home and having those tough conversations. So we go into a lot more tools than we covered today.
And if you were interested in Build Your Mojo, you're welcome to try to contact us.
Oh, yeah.
Even though it started yesterday, I think we could bring you in if you needed to.
I'll put Susan's email up there if you want to talk to her about, I have to do it to everybody.
Okay. There you go.
If you want to ask her about Build Your Mojo. Then we also do this is a really fun one. It's an in-person 3-day workshop, Find Your Mojo in Montana. May 19th to the 21st is our next one. And we incorporate Susan Works with the Horses, you and a round pen with a horse. Do you want to
It's really profound. The things I've learned from working with horses, this isn't about riding horses. This is about using the brilliance of a horse's relational skills to help you understand how you may be communicating and missing some communication opportunities, getting some really incredible feedback from horses. So, but that's and we bring in a bunch of other things.
Oh, we have. I do some mind-body stuff because that's kind of my expertise, like some of the tools we're doing, and we have some creative stuff, and it's in Whitefish, and it's really fun. And everything's included in the price of the workshop, your hotel and everything, food. So, and this is just us. You can contact us both. We do coaching, team building, speaking, online programs, and of course in-person programs. And we love the opportunity to speak to organizations. So if you would like us to come to yours, let us know.
We especially love it when we get to stay here in our home state of Montana.
Yeah.
We know local as it could be actually 4 or 5 hour drive, but we don't mind. We love Montana. So go ahead.
I know it's true.
Yeah. Jen,
Wonderful.
I think that's the end of us.
Great.
If there's anything else you wanted to share.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to both of you. I think you've given us some wonderful tools, and I love the questions and conversation. I wanted to let people know that we are going to have a recording of the presentation today, and we'll have it available on the PowerHouse site and the Women's Foundation site, as well as sending it out to the folks who are registered. And Chris, Marie, and Susan, of course, you'll have that as well. And I just wanted to offer to people who are interested in getting more involved to go ahead and go to our PowerHouse MT site, make a profile for yourself, and share your skills with the rest of Montana. We are working on creating a support system for women leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs and amazing women across the state, and we want you to be a part of it. And next Monday is Mentor Monday MT, so you can check out the site too to learn more about opportunities to meet in person, perhaps in a community near you through one of our Mentor Monday MT events that happen as part of PowerHouse across the state of Montana.
Yes, and
so
those
that's
are very fun.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Yes,
those,
and thank you guys
events.
for helping to organize the Flathead version. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
we like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Wonderful.
Okay. Well,
okay.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.